Thank you, DSU Takeuchi. Thank you, Minister Lee, for your welcoming remarks. And thank you to the Singaporean Ministry of Education for being such gracious hosts and allowing us to launch TALIS here in Singapore. To everyone in the room, good morning. Oh, come on, this is the Singapore Ministry of Education. We can do better than this. Good morning. That's better. My name is Ruochen, and like Duncan said, I work with TALIS at the OECD. And as I just demonstrated, I used to be a teacher. Like I suspect many people in the room were. Before I talk about TALIS, I'd like to talk about my time briefly as a teacher. And to begin, I'd like to show you where I was a teacher. I taught in a small Pacific Islands country called the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And if there are geography teachers here, they will tell you that island is not really an appropriate word for this. This is a coral atoll. They are thin rings of land that surround a central lagoon. And when I say thin, I mean very thin. So this is my school, and from end to end, it is about 150 meters across. That's not a typo. This is meters, not kilometers. To give you a sense of scale, this is the Singaporean Ministry of Education. You thought your island was small. This picture was taken in 2008. That's when I last taught. And unfortunately, my school is no longer 150 meters across. This was my school building, and this was my classroom. The reason I am sharing this with you is because teaching is one of the most common professions around the world. You can go to the farthest, most remote corner of the world, and there you will find teachers. It is also one of the most well-known professions. Almost everyone has had several teachers in their lives. Many have teachers in their family. Everyone has an opinion about teachers and teaching. And yet, despite teachers being everywhere and everyone knowing teachers, teaching can also be a rather lonely activity. When I was a teacher, I felt quite isolated. But it didn't have anything to do with where I was. What made me feel isolated was when I closed the door to my classroom, I turned around and there were 25 students staring at just me, waiting to be taught. That's what really made me feel like I was on an island. And during those moments, I found myself asking, what are other teachers doing? The person in the classroom next to me, the teacher in the school down the road, maybe even teachers in other countries. If I could talk to them right now, what would they tell me? Do they share my experiences? Do they share my struggles? What would they have to teach me? Let's talk about TALIS. TALIS is the Teaching and Learning International Survey. As you've heard, it's the world's largest survey of schools and principals. We started in 2008, and last year we sampled 280,000 teachers in 55 education systems. This is our way of making teachers heard, so they can tell each other what is happening and tell all of us what they need. And I'd like to share with you the results that they have told us. This is the voice of teachers. And we'll start with, who are the teachers? Around the world, we see that teachers are getting older. The average age of teachers across OECD countries is now 45 years old. In some countries, you see here on the left, it is now over 50 years old. I'm highlighting these three, Portugal, Latvia, and Italy, because we'll talk a little bit more about them later on. When we talk about aging teachers, we will very quickly start talking about teacher shortages. We've seen a lot of data that there is a global need for teachers. We simply don't have enough. And when we look at TALIS data, we see a similar but perhaps complicated picture. There are absolutely countries that have teacher shortages, and these have increased since 2018. There are also countries that have decreased in the number of teachers that they need. Because shortages are not necessarily a global matter or even a national matter. It's a local matter. When we say teacher shortage, we mean teachers who teach certain subjects in certain areas at certain levels of education. One school might have a shortage and the next school might not. And to illustrate some of this complexity, take a look at these two countries, Portugal and Latvia. Remember from the first slide, these two countries had some of the oldest teachers in the world, and yet they're going in very different directions in terms of teacher shortages. Latvia is increasing in how many teachers they need. Portugal is actually decreasing. It's just context. So regardless of whether or not countries have a shortage or they don't have a shortage, all countries want to maintain a sustainable supply of qualified teachers. This is a goal. So what are countries doing to help achieve this goal? Some are looking to other fields to hire teachers. We call these teachers second career teachers. They worked in another field for 10 years before they became teachers. On average, it's only about 8% of teachers are second career teachers. But you see over here in places like Iceland, New Zealand, Australia, Netherlands, well over 15 and even 20% of teachers are recruited from other fields. Something else that countries are doing is they're hiring teachers part-time. Globally, about 20% of teachers work part-time. But in places like the Netherlands and Brazil, being a part-time teacher is just being a normal teacher. Most teachers work part-time. So we're talking about sustaining a qualified supply of teachers, and that means we need to pay attention to novice teachers. These are teachers that TALIS defines as having been in the profession for 5 years or less. If they are thriving, if they wish to sustain and maintain and stay in the profession, then we have a healthy supply of teachers. But of course, novice teachers have certain needs that not everyone else does. Around the world, about 18% of teachers fall into this category. Some fewer, some a lot more. And we ask them, what do you need? What are your challenges? And something that they repeatedly tell us is that novice teachers struggle more with classroom management. We ask, how stressful is maintaining classroom discipline for you? And around the world, novice teachers find this to be a much more stressful activity than experienced teachers do. Gray dot novice teachers, black line experienced teachers. Blue bar means that novice teachers are more stressed by classroom management and classroom discipline than experienced teachers. So what are governments doing to help support novice teachers? As the DSG mentioned, one important policy lever is mentorship. And we do see that around the world, mentorship for novice teachers is increasing. This is the share of novice teachers who say they have a mentor compared to 2018. In only a few countries is it decreasing. That's a good sign. But of course, if you want mentorship, you need time. You need time for someone to mentor you. You need time to learn from that person. So something else that many countries are doing is they are reducing novice teachers' working hours. Because if you are teaching, you can't have a mentor. And we see that around the world, in most countries, novice teachers teach fewer hours than their experienced colleagues. So they can receive mentorship, so they can have more professional learning. And also, there's an outcomes question here. Novice teachers are generally less experienced. They haven't had time to accumulate expertise. You might not want them to have the highest teaching loads in your country. You probably want experienced teachers to carry that load. But you do see there are a couple of blue bars, which represent countries where novice teachers actually teach more hours than experienced teachers. And that could be problematic on a few levels. So this is what novice teachers are doing in the classroom. But let's also talk about where their classrooms are. What type of schools do novice teachers teach in? TALIS asks teachers to tell us about the composition of your classroom. What sorts of students are you teaching? And we see that, in general, novice teachers actually teach in schools and classrooms with more challenging environments. This chart shows you the share of teachers that teach classes where a high percentage of the students have difficulties understanding the language of instruction. It's a more difficult environment to teach in, for sure. And novice teachers tend to teach in these classes more than experienced teachers. So this is probably a reflection of teacher allocation policies. How do countries decide where teachers teach? Often, we see that seniority is an important criteria. Those teachers with more experience, they get the first pick of where they want to teach. And usually, they pick well-resourced environments that are maybe a little bit less demanding, and then the ones left over go to the novice teachers. And that's something that we see here. So overall, we ask the question, do novice teachers want to keep teaching? And in some cases, we see some astonishing results. In places like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, sometimes over 50% of novice teachers say they wish to leave the profession within 5 years. And if you remember the very first slide about the age of teachers, these countries have some of the oldest teachers in the world. So they are simultaneously aging and their novice teachers want to leave. That spells some trouble in the next 5 to 10 years. But those circumstances are not inevitable. Remember this country, Italy. They also had very old teachers, yet their novice teachers wish to stay in the profession. It goes to show that policies do matter. Circumstances can look the same, but the decisions that education systems and governments make can have a difference in the behavior of teachers. So those were the teachers. Let's talk about their teaching. What are they doing? And the biggest factor of what they are doing is, who are their students? Who are they teaching? No surprise, student diversity is increasing. More students are refugees. More students are diagnosed with special education needs. More students are non-native speakers of the language of instruction. More students are immigrants. And when you take a look at this at the country level, for example, special education needs, you see almost a unanimous increase. In almost every single country that participates in TALIS, teachers report teaching more students with special education needs. That places some demands on schools and teachers. Similarly, here are refugees. And certainly in Eastern European countries that border Ukraine, we see an explosion of refugee students entering schools. Take a look at the Czech Republic. In 2018, 4% of teachers in the Czech Republic taught in a school that had at least one refugee. In 2024, it was 75%. Think about the demands that places on the teachers in those schools and those schools' resources to support that kind of change so quickly. And given all of this change, we start asking, teachers, do you feel prepared to teach these students? And they say, well, I'm pretty comfortable doing this. The content of the subjects I teach, the pedagogy. I'm a little less comfortable doing this. Supporting students' social emotional development and teaching in multicultural and multilingual settings. And when you see the data about the changes in student composition, you begin to understand why this might be the case. But of course, some teachers are still more prepared than others. We ask teachers, do you care about your students' social and emotional needs? And we disaggregated the results by the gender of the teacher. In every single country, female teachers care more about the social and emotional needs of their students than male teachers. My wife heard me rehearsing this slide, and she interrupted me. And she said, it took you 6 years and 280,000 teachers to conclude that men are bad with emotions. You don't need a chart. You can just show them some of the text messages you sent me this morning, and that would be enough. Maybe nothing has changed as much the past couple of years as technology. The technology that teachers are using, the technology that students are using. But maybe even before we talk about what they're using, technology is impacting where education occurs. As the DSG said, during the pandemic, much of formal schooling moved online. And there were questions about, would it stay that way, or would we go back to what we were used to 10 years ago? Our data show that, in some sense, it has stayed. Almost 20% of teachers are in schools where at least one lesson was taught online or hybrid in the past month. Singapore, on the far right and far left, is a big outlier. That's home-based learning. So no other country has that, and I think that could be an interesting practice to share to a lot of other countries around the world. But, of course, teachers, like the rest of us, they're worried about what all of this technology means. Over 60% think that frequently using technology is affecting students' well-being. If we're talking about technology and well-being, we need to talk about artificial intelligence. And I didn't know how to do it, so I asked artificial intelligence to talk about itself. Like me, teachers are also concerned about using artificial intelligence. Not just because it might amplify biases, but they're worried that it might lead to inappropriate recommendations, and they're even more worried that it enables students to misrepresent their work. to cheat. At the same time, teachers also recognize the potential of artificial intelligence to write lesson plans, adapt learning, and automate administrative tasks, something we already heard from Minister Lee. Teachers are already using artificial intelligence. As the DSG said, almost 40% of teachers around the world are already using artificial intelligence. And this was from last year. If you ask teachers right now, I'm betting it would be a lot higher than this. And leading the way, as the DSG said, we have the United Arab Emirates and we have Singapore in terms of the teachers who have embraced AI the most. We also asked teachers, have you received professional learning in how to use artificial intelligence? And the results look rather similar. About 40% have, and again, leading the way, Singapore and the United Arab Emirates. Not just in terms of using artificial intelligence, but providing professional learning and how to use artificial intelligence. If you put these two graphs together, what you see is this. You have a very strong correlation in terms of countries where teachers have received training in artificial intelligence and countries where teachers use artificial intelligence. More of one leads to more of the other. And this is a very encouraging sign. It suggests that education systems are trying to regulate and provide guidelines on how to use artificial intelligence. The worst thing would be unregulated chaos. So we won't give you any guidelines, but you can use whatever you want. And that's what we don't see. So we see some positive developments. I want to talk about cooperation because I felt quite isolated when I was a teacher. And I want to know, do other teachers feel the same way? And as the DSG said, actually, less and less. In every single system, almost, teachers are cooperating more in terms of how many hours per week they spend on teamwork and other cooperative activities. In no education system did this go down. How they cooperate is interesting. First, we have kind of more formal professional collaboration. Requires a little bit of coordination. Teaching in the same class or participating in professional learning together, and we see the distribution here. But of course, teachers don't always need coordination to collaborate. They can do it on their own, and they do. They share materials with each other. They talk about their students' needs. And one thing that we found interesting here, less than 8% of teachers regularly observe each other's classes, which is something that I think could be really leveraged when you think about how teachers work together. Because teachers like working together. We took a look at how satisfied teachers are with their jobs and how much they collaborate, and we see that where teachers collaborate more, they're more satisfied with their jobs. So if we start talking about well-being of teachers, retaining teachers, this could be an interesting place to start. And I want to conclude with talking about how teachers are doing. Are they thriving or are they merely surviving? Stress is increasing. Since 2018, most education systems have increased in terms of the share of teachers who say that they are really stressed. A couple have decreased. And we then asked them, what is stressing you out the most? What is the biggest, strongest source of stress? And similar to previous administrations of TALIS, the strongest source of stress is administrative work. The lowest source of stress is teaching. Teachers like teaching. They don't like filling out papers. And that's interesting because if we ask ourselves, where is the one area out of these four where artificial intelligence could realistically automate the most right now, it's probably that one. Similar to this automatic attendance taking that I just heard from Minister Lee, there could be real potential there in solving teachers' biggest source of stress. But of course, a big part of any professional's well-being, their job satisfaction, same for teachers, is their salary. And we ask teachers, are you satisfied with your salary? In most countries, it is increasing. Teachers are becoming increasingly satisfied with their salaries. In a few, it is decreasing, including in Singapore. Yes, salary matters, but it's not everything. There are so many different factors that contribute to teachers' satisfaction, and we ask teachers about them all. Are they part-time or full-time? Is their contract fixed? Is it indefinite? What are the hours that they work? Vacation days. And we see that in terms of predicting whether or not they stay in the profession, it's those other things that more often, more strongly predict whether or not teachers stay in the profession than their salary. Everything matters. Everything. And I want to end on a positive note. As the DSG said, for teachers, their job isn't just a vocation. Oftentimes, it's a passion. It's a mission. And we simply ask teachers, are you satisfied with your job? Very simple question, straightforward. All in all, are you satisfied? And they are. About 90% of teachers worldwide are satisfied with their jobs, and the lowest country is 79%. Teachers like where they are. They like what they're doing. I think this is a testament not only to teachers' motivation and their capacity to adapt, but also how governments have been able to provide timely and relevant support to teachers to help them teach. And I want to end with my favorite slide from the report, my favorite page from the report. Behind these charts and the report and the figures and the data is a wonderful team at the OECD. And behind that wonderful team are wonderful teachers. So each person in the TALIS team wrote in the report and acknowledged one teacher that made a difference in their lives. For me, thank you, Mr. Francis from Idaho Falls High School in the United States. And thank you to all of you for coming and for listening. If you wish to learn more about TALIS, this QR code will lead you to our website. I look forward to the discussion.